Taylor Swift's revenge got quieter, and her writing got sharper as she kept writing these songs from debut onward. But the interesting evolution is not that young Taylor was angry, and older Taylor became mature enough to forgive everyone. That would be neat, moralistic, and completely wrong. She never stops being angry. She gets better at deciding where to aim it. Across her catalog, revenge expands from one person getting the last word into a question of public image, power, consequence, and eventually authorship. Who gets to decide what the injury means after it happens? So rather than ranking Taylor's angriest songs, we're going to use them as a songwriting class for each one. We'll ask 4 questions: who is the target, where is the camera, how big is the conflict, and what price does the narrator pay? Because a revenge song gets more interesting the moment it becomes about more than revenge. Picture to Burn is built for instant emotional alignment. You do not need a corkboard, a timeline, or 3 fan theories to understand the premise. Someone has disappointed the narrator, and she wants the satisfaction of making him regret it. Everything moves outward. The energy is in the address, the threats, the jokes, and the escalating fantasy of retaliation. Even the title turns a keepsake into an action. A picture is normally something you preserve here. It becomes something disposable. That is the first lesson. If your goal is catharsis, clarity can be more useful than complexity. A very direct revenge song gives the listener 3 things immediately. It gives us a recognizable target, it gives us an emotional team to join, and it gives us language that feels more decisive than real life usually does. This is not trying to be a courtroom. It is trying to capture the exact thought you have before you calm down, and that exaggeration matters. Picture to Burn works as country pop revenge fantasy because the narrator does not stop to question whether every response is fair. The certainty is part of the pleasure. She is not processing the breakup, she is staging the comeback. If you're writing this kind of song, ask, what does the narrator want the audience to do? Laugh at the target, judge them, fear the narrator? Sing along with the threat. Picture to Burn wants immediate alliance. It points, and it wants you to point with it. But once the target is clear, a writer has a choice. You can keep attacking the event, or you can turn the people involved into characters. The song Better Than Revenge makes that second choice. The narrator does not simply tell us she was hurt. She casts the conflict. There is a rival. There is a performance of superiority. There are punchlines designed to reduce the other person into a role. That gives the song speed, theatricality, and an instantly recognizable villain. But it also reveals a trade-off in revenge writing. Character attacks are efficient, but efficiency can flatten the emotional world. The original recording directs its sharpest insult toward another woman. The man whose choices helped create the situation receives far less of that force. So the song becomes a useful example of how heartbreak can inherit a familiar script. 2 women positioned as competitors while male agency fades toward the edge of the frame. When Taylor recorded Better Than Revenge again for Speak Now, Taylor's version, one prominent line changed. The original describes the woman through what she supposedly does. The new image gives us a moth, a flame, and someone holding the matches. We should be precise here. The textual change is a fact. Claiming we know Taylor's private reason for making it would be speculation. What we can say is that the new version redistributes agency. A moth moves toward a flame. The image still preserves temptation and danger, but the man is no longer written as an object that can simply be taken. That is a fascinating act of revision because it does not erase the original song. Both versions now exist. We can hear the anger as it was first written, and then hear an older writer make a different choice inside the same structure. That does not mean direct anger is artistically inferior. Better Than Revenge is supposed to move quickly. Its theatrical certainty is part of its appeal. But if you're writing your own song, this is the revision question to steal. Am I exposing a pattern, or have I assigned someone a role? Because the role is easier to attack. Then Taylor's revenge writing finds a much bigger stage. Bad Blood takes interpersonal damage and scales it into an anthem. The language is broad, forceful, and communal. Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes turns a damaged relationship into an injury too serious for a casual apology. Taylor described the song's premise in 2015 as a friendship ending that can be every bit as emotionally damaging to someone as the loss of a romantic relationship. That distinction widened the emotional territory, but the finished song and its blockbuster video widened the presentation even more. The conflict is no longer framed like a private argument, it is an ensemble spectacle. This is what scale does to songwriting. Private pain becomes a slogan. Repetition turns grievance into ritual. The listener does not merely observe the conflict, the chorus recruits us into it. Then, Look What You Made Me Do pushes spectacle into self-mythology. The revenge is not only aimed at an opponent, it is staged around the narrator's public image. Trust, reputation, performance, and previous versions of Taylor all become material inside the song. When the narrator says she trusts nobody and nobody trusts her, retaliation already has a cost. Victory is not presented as uncomplicated freedom. The conflict has changed the social world around her, and when the old Taylor cannot come to the phone, the song does something stranger than a normal threat. It turns identity itself into theater. The narrator gets revenge by controlling the character everyone is watching. This gives us 2 useful techniques. Bad Blood turns revenge into something communal and chantable. Look what you made me do makes the performance itself the weapon. Sometimes the power is not defeating the other person, it is becoming impossible to ignore. But spectacle has a limitation. A bigger chorus does not automatically create a deeper conflict. If the only change is volume, the listener may finish the song knowing exactly what the narrator feels, but nothing more about what the feeling has done to her. Bigger does not mean deeper. The next shift is almost the opposite. The revenge song gets quieter, and suddenly we can hear the cost. In Mad Woman, anger is no longer just a projectile. It is evidence inside a power struggle. What a shame she went mad. You made her like that. That cause and effect structure is the entire trap. Someone provokes a woman, waits for her response, and then treats that response as proof that she was unreasonable all along. The target has widened. This can still be heard as conflict between people. But the song also examines a pattern: who is allowed to express anger, who gets discredited for it, and who benefits when the response becomes the story instead of the provocation. That is a major songwriting upgrade. The antagonist no longer has to be only a person. It can be a social rule, a pressure, or a system that determines whose version of events sounds credible. And importantly, the narrator does not become calm enough to rise above it. Her anger remains alive. The song simply understands the machinery around that anger. Then, My Tears Ricochet moves the camera again. Earlier revenge songs stand in front of the person who caused the pain. This song feels as if it is walking through the emotional ruins after the confrontation. And I can go anywhere I want, just not home. That is not a victory line. It contains freedom and exile at the same time. The narrator can leave, but leaving does not restore what was lost. The injury has altered the meaning of home. This is where revenge becomes more than striking back. It becomes haunting. The song's funeral and ghost imagery create a bond that continues even after trust has died. The conflict is no longer cleanly divided into winner and loser because both people remain inside the aftermath. A simple revenge premise says, "You hurt me, so I hurt you." A more layered version asks, "You hurt me, the damage changed the room, and now what does every possible response cost?" That does not make the anger nicer. It makes the anger more expensive. For writers, this is one of the most useful techniques in Taylor's catalog. Write the aftermath, not only the impact. What object has changed meaning? What place can the narrator no longer return to? What does winning fail to repair? The third answer is usually where a revenge song finds a second life, but Taylor never abandons the pleasure of fantasy retaliation. The later catalog still likes sharp outfits, leverage, secrets, and someone getting exactly what is coming to them. Vigilante Shit does not sound like Picture to Burn, but it shares some of the same pleasure. Both songs offer the fantasy of being more decisive in the song than most people can be in real life. The difference is presentation. Don't get sad, get even. That sentence removes the messy middle. The narrator does not plead, explode, or explain every step. Revenge arrives as posture, timing, and carefully placed information. Even lately I've been dressing for revenge makes retaliation sound less like a spontaneous reaction and more like controlled self-presentation. Withholding creates authority. The narrator sounds powerful, partly because she tells us only what she wants us to know. But we should not turn that coolness into a moral ranking. Vigilante Shit is still a revenge fantasy. It is noir, camp, and the pleasure of imagined leverage. Later does not automatically mean wiser. Sometimes it means the writer has become more deliberate about the genre she is playing with. That prevents this entire evolution from becoming too neat. Taylor does not move from cruel songs to kind songs. Directness, spectacle, atmosphere, and irony remain available tools. The growth is in how many tools she can use and how consciously she can choose between them. Then Thank You Aimee turns toward legacy. All that time you were throwing punches, I was building something. That contrast changes the emotional action. The narrator is no longer only punishing, exposing, or outmaneuvering an antagonist. She is placing that person inside the origin story of what she created. The revenge is authorship. The injury becomes material, and the narrator controls the final meaning of that material. But this is not peaceful closure. The song is still pointed. The antagonist remains present enough to receive a song, a title, and a place in the archive. That creates the question that makes the writing interesting. If you transform pain into art, have you escaped the person who hurt you, or preserved them inside your work forever? The answer may be both. Legacy can be reclamation. It can also keep an old wound active. Thank You Aimee does not have to resolve that contradiction, because the contradiction is the point. The narrator wins by building something permanent, but part of that permanence is the record of what happened. So, if you want to borrow this evolution for your own writing, do not begin by asking, how do I make this line meaner? Start with the emotional action. Does the narrator want to punish, expose, mock, survive, mourn, reclaim, or transform? Then choose the camera distance. Are we still inside the argument? Are we looking back at it? Are we above it, controlling the frame? Or are we standing in the room after everyone else has left? Next, decide the scale. Is the antagonist one person, a public narrative, an expectation, or an entire system that rewards the harm? Then give the anger a price. What did retaliation fail to repair? What did survival require the narrator to abandon? What can she win without ever getting back? Finally, end with ownership rather than simple victory. The most memorable final move may not be showing what the antagonist lost, it may be revealing who now gets to define what happened. And if these songs still feel connected despite all those changes, it is because Taylor keeps the emotion stable while changing the dramatic question. Picture to Burn asks, how can I make you regret losing me? Better Than Revenge asks, who can I blame for taking what I wanted? Look What You Made Me Do asks, how can I seize control of the spectacle? Mad Woman asks, who benefits when my reaction becomes the crime? My Tears Ricochet asks, what happens when the person who hurt me still claims part of my story? Vigilante Shit asks, what if information is more powerful than confrontation? And Thank You Aimee asks, who owns the meaning of the wound after the work survives it? That is how one emotion keeps producing different songs. A writer does not need to manufacture a new feeling every time. Change the target, the audience, the power balance, or the definition of victory. Revenge stops being a repeated punchline and becomes a lens for character. The anger remains recognizable, but the narrator reveals a different belief about what power would actually look like. That is the real progression across these songs. Picture to Burn creates catharsis through direct aim. Better Than Revenge turns people into theatrical roles and exposes the limits of doing that. Bad Blood and Look What You Made Me Do make conflict a public spectacle. Mad Woman examines the system surrounding anger. My Tears Ricochet writes the cost that remains after the fight. Vigilante Shit enjoys revenge as controlled fantasy, and Thank You Aimee asks whether the ultimate last word is punishment or authorship. So no, Taylor Swift's revenge songs do not grow up because anger disappears. They grow up because anger stops being the only thing on the page. The early mode says, look what you did. The later mode asks, look what your actions set in motion and look who gets to tell the story now. That is the songwriting upgrade, not less revenge, more perspective.